Good morning, Facebook. Back at it another Thursday morning here with my main man, Rick Speck, straight out of
Morning.
Detroit, Grosse Pointe. And currently with Safe and Just Michigan, keeping us updated on what's happening throughout the state with all of our formerly incarcerated community. So good morning. We appreciate you all hanging out with us this morning, as always. And we have a very cool, one of our sisters, cool person, Ms. Zaria Davis, who we get to interview this morning. And we're excited about that. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. So as you know, many of you know me, Nate Johnson, here with Fresh Coast Alliance on the west side. We're on the fresh coast of Michigan. The Big Lake, Michigan, here in Ski Town, Muskegon, Michigan. So yeah, we do reentry, recovery, do a number of things with criminal justice reform. We're passionate about being able to get into the schools and educate the youngsters on the power of the choice. One choice can change the whole trajectory of your life. And we want to help clean up what we help mess up. So we have a tribe of people here at Fresh Coast that have joined forces to do that. And so that's a little bit about me, Fresh Coast, and what we're doing. Rick, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about you and the work that you're doing with Safe and Just.
Sure, thanks, Nate. Rick Speck, Community Engagement Specialist for Safe and Just Michigan. I've been with Safe and Just about 6 months. Prior to that, I was with the ACLU of Michigan working on the Smart Justice campaign. And prior to that, I was a direct service provider for men and women returning home from prison, specifically to the city of Detroit. Formerly incarcerated, served 3 prison terms spanning 18 and a half years, 2 in the state, 1 in the federal system. So, you know, I'm the guy that don't get it the first time.
You take a couple rounds,
I'm that
couple
guy,
trips
right?
around the mountain, yeah. Like the children of Israel.
You know, there's always that like long road, and then there's that, hey, just straight shot. Yeah, I go that winding
What's
path.
over there?
But you know, the work at Safe and Just is, we're a nonpartisan organization that is working to get legislation pushed that keeps our community safe, that helps people come home, to heal heal the traumas from the folks coming home, from the community as well. And we do that with legislation. Clean slate has been big on our radar and work we've been doing. Heavily involved in pretrial task force that the governor did, and Lieutenant Governor and Chief Justice McCormick both co-chaired. So, you know, just excited. I came here because all we do is criminal justice reform. And so that's my passion. That's what I know is going to heal the community and get people home, keep people home. And also let's not forget, we want to stop people from going, right? Like,
yeah,
because that adds another layer of trauma that people have to unpack. I mean, I think we all know how traumatizing prison can be on different levels for different reasons. People,
absolutely.
Right? So yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited that we have Dr. Zaria Davis here. So I'm going to kick it over to her. I can't wait to hear her story. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. I call Nate my brother. Like I feel like he like adopted me into his family some years back at Just Leadership Emerging Leaders down in Louisville. And that was really the start of a lot of things for me. I'm currently working as a senior associate with Pretrial Justice Institute, and the focus is advocacy and community engagement. So doing a lot of work in that pretrial side, doing not only community education, but also working with what we call system actors. So the pretrial offices, probation offices, legislators, if they want to sit down and talk with us, anybody that really listen on both sides of the table. And we really are working to bring everybody together to have some real impact and change in focusing on the state of Ohio for me personally, because I'm a part of the Arts for Justice program or grant that we have here, but also doing work nationally with other groups as well. So really been enjoying that, and I'm serving as a facilitator for some of our trainings with those system actors. So we have a group that's going to be starting with our fundamentals program. And we also, prior to COVID, we're doing some other in-person trainings that have now ceased, of course. And really, this whole process has started because of my own experience. I am formerly incarcerated. I was in the federal system, and I had a really horrible pretrial experience. 2 attorneys, really feeling like I did not understand or know the system well enough, even though I was actually working in a profession. I was in social work, but just didn't understand the criminal legal system in this country and really what everything meant. And so being a part of this team with Pretrial Justice Institute, or also known as PJI, has really gave me an opportunity to empower the community and to really educate so that they have a voice in what's happening in their life and in the system, here in Cincinnati, where I live, as well as the state of Ohio. So that is my current full-time employment. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the other work that I'm doing, but just really excited to be here with you all today, and just glad to be a part of this conversation.
Absolutely.
Hey,
yeah.
Go ahead, Nate. Go ahead.
The thing that always gets me is like you and Stan and a number of you guys come home and get doctorate degrees, right? Me and Rick, Rick are trying to.
Look, I got like 6 credits for my associates, right? And I'm like,
right.
I'm like, I'm gonna get that thing. Like, I got that. I'm like PhD.
But that's
I can barely spell PhD.
But it's so
you writing policies, you know how to write. I'm not hearing that.
he's a true champion, man. But being able to do that, just the motivation and the inspiration to go and do that after being incarcerated, and I have to believe that it's in order to prepare myself to get into spaces to be a part of the solution, to really create reform, right? That's admirable. I just wanted to point that out. That's for me. I love it when I see those types of things happening, especially amongst the formerly incarcerated. Yeah.
I want to share the uniqueness of my story, because mine is actually a little different. I actually got mine during my pretrial period. So I had a pretrial officer. Who I actually still do work with, who was very much about, like, you know how people say reentry starts when you go in? No, she was like, reentry starts before you go in. So she encouraged me to, like, get everything done that I felt like I needed to get done beforehand, because she understood, the importance of what that would mean afterwards. So I had already started a program, and I honestly defended my dissertation, I would say about 3 or 4 days before meeting with the U.S. attorney.
Wow. So amongst all this you got going on, right? You got this case that you're battling, and in the midst of that, you're defending your dissertation.
Absolutely. And, and it's crazy because
it's even more inspiring.
During that same time, I also lost my mother. So it was like one of the last conversations with my mom was like, when are you gonna finish school? When are you gonna get all this stuff done? So I really had to, in the midst of, interviews and investigations, I really had to buckle down and get it done. And then I also, during that same time, went and became certified as a life coach. So, I mean, like, I tell people all the time, like, I probably had a unique experience with the pretrial office itself, right? Because how many officers really push their people to, like, do other things? But I think he understood with me, my personality before I went in, I was like a people pleaser. That's the one thing I learned through Celebrate Recovery about myself. And I really had really high expectations of myself always, like with interviews, with everything. And so as a result of that, I made poor choices, and I surrounded myself with people that weren't always healthy for me. And so I think my pretrial officer really had an idea of like who I was as a person, which is rare, I think, because it's not even like we saw each other very often. But she just really poured into me. And so I still do work with them even now. I go in when they have people that are entering the prison system. I go in and just kind of talk to them and do like an orientation, the real orientation, not like the orientation that they give them where they're like, yeah, this is great. Everything's awesome. I'm like, she lets me actually come in and have real conversations.
You remember the video, Nate, that had the candy bar? If you find a candy bar on your bed, that's what you're using to prepare people for possibly the most traumatic experience of their life.
Yeah.
You're telling them that somebody's going to leave a Snickers bar on their pillow.
Yeah. Come on, work with
me.
We got
a winning story. We got a winning story.
The world's just full of irony, you know?
Yes, absolutely. So higher education is so critical for me. And so I really, I push that as much as I can. And so I do work with Dr. San Andres from Prison Cell to PhD. I'm a leadership facilitator with them. I love working with that team of people. They're just such an awesome group. And actually we'll be modeling a P2P program here in Ohio within our system as well. So I'm really excited about that. So yeah, this is, I believe that everything has happened to really push me into my purpose and what I'm really passionate about. And so I'm really excited about like just where I am in life and just the work that I feel like God is leading me to do, definitely.
Well, I definitely agree with you on education. I mean, I joke about my associates, but, I had a skilled trade as a painter before I went in. And it was actually a good friend of mine that was taking correspondence courses through Ohio University at the time, that encouraged me to sign up for this Inside Out program. So I took a 4th year level criminal justice class through Michigan State, and just the learning, right, and getting back into it was just so inspiring, right? And I came home and with, I literally filled out my FAFSA from the inside once I got my parole. So I came home because I had an address I could send all this stuff to. And within like 8 weeks, I think it was actually less than 6 weeks, I was a full-time student. So, in inside reading books and self-educating, for me, that was the big difference maker from the first 2 times I was released versus the 3rd time. I always tell folks, I couldn't look my mom in the eye the first 2 times and say, Mom, I'm not going back. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be honest. My thing was, I'm going to try. I'm going to try not to. She's always like, what do you mean you're going to try not to? Like, no, you're not going back. This time when I came home, through educating myself with books and this college class and other, men around me that wanted to learn, my whole mindset was different, right? Like, and I came home to that support group that, sure, they still had some reservations, but not as much as the first 2 times, right? And so for me, that was the turning point. It was educating myself.
Absolutely, and that's why we so I'm a part of like the Unlock Higher Ed Coalition, and we are really pushing for full reinstatement of the Pell, because what you just said literally is what we talk about all the time, how that opportunity to get education inside and as well as access outside, is so critical to people's, their journey. It's just so important. So thank you for sharing that, because that just I may have to use that when we're talking your story. Have you come and share your story? When we're talking,
I'm going to be in Cincinnati. I'm going to be down there. I got accepted for the JLUSA program, the Midwestern leadership. It'll be in Cincinnati. So it got postponed because of COVID, but next year, 2021, I'll be there. I'll be in Cincy. So.
Oh yeah, you'll see my face then. I'll be doing some pop-ups.
That's right. I
good.
Can't wait.
That's awesome. So tell us on the educational piece, the Fill in the Gap organization, the stuff that you're doing with Fill in the Gap, which is, it transpires while individuals are still incarcerated with the focus on education. What is practically, what does that look like? Do you set them up with iPads? Do you set them up with books? You just go in and teach a class? What does that look like, since there's a value in education?
Sure. So honestly, filling the gap really came about from my own incarceration and my reentry process. So I want to just kind of give some backstory with that real quick. So when I was inside, like I talked to so many women, like the women at Alderson will tell you, like I was constantly asking questions. I had like this little survey, like that's just my brain, how it works. And my goal was to develop something when I came out, because what I learned is there were so many women inside with me, one, who were there for like conspiracy, like 90% of women that I did time with were there for conspiracy. And then so many were mothers. A lot of them may have worked but couldn't go back to like whatever they had done previously. So I really wanted to do something to support women. And then when I got home and I really started getting engaged with Just Leadership, I realized that, and actually having a conversation with Deanna, who's the CEO of Just Leadership currently, we had a conversation as it relates to like the importance of policy. And so when I started to develop the program, I took a step back, because initially I was like, I want to go in, I want to do X, Y, and Z. But the way I set it up is probably like 4 different components to it. So we are going to be modeling the P2P program, where we'll be able to go inside and do work with the women in the prisons. And I'm starting with the women because I feel like that's where the gap is right now with a lot of
Are you doing
resources.
state or federal institutions?
I'm doing state. For the women, we have 2 state prisons, yeah. So I've been trying to get in touch with them in regards to our state right now as it relates to, we do have tablets here, and I have a person who's willing to like do recordings. And so my goal is to try to get that on the tablet. I'm also working with our state Department of Reentry to try to at least get the names of the women who are coming home during COVID. So I may actually start with an outside group, because I can at least get them tablets and try to get them, like Wi-Fi access and things like that, versus inside right now, there's just a lot of barriers. So the goal, though, is for the women to start the program inside. And there's not just the educational component, but also building out like a participatory program where we're going to be talking about like what they perceive as some of their barriers, not just with employment and education, but just overall, and also being able to address some of the trauma that's associated with pre-incarceration, during incarceration, and post-incarceration, because I believe that it exists throughout the whole spectrum, right? It doesn't just start at one part. So being able to address those things. I have a partner who I present with quite a bit. Her name is Charlotte Garnes, and she has a workforce development program. And so I'm partnering with her as well to bring in some of those pieces. When I went to the state, I was like, I don't want not one more, here's how to do a resume, fill out this piece of paper. I'm like, stop, just it just needs to end. And it needs to come from us. It needs to come from the people who actually have these lived experiences that actually know, like, this does not really help me, so what are the things that can really help? So my goal is to fill in all those gaps of services. So that's where the name came from. So the goal is to look at what are the resources that are currently there and not duplicate those, but then fill in any gaps or holes that may exist. And so one of the other things they talked a lot about is that, this area, our region of the country is really, we have really high numbers as far as sex trafficking. And so we have a lot of women that are leaving the prisons and automatically just entering into that, not even knowing, right? They're befriending people while they're inside. People are putting money on their books, and they're having these conversations, and they're like, oh, I got y'all. And I've talked to people that work in the state, and they say, like, there's a need to be able to really address some of these things to prevent these women from kind of going into that world, not even knowing. A lot of times they're thinking this person's their boyfriend or this person's a friend. And so I really want to be in a place as I'm continuing to grow to really set up some resources and services throughout the state of Ohio, partnering with different groups. I was blessed to get a $20,000 United Way grant to get myself going. And I also got a mini grant through Resist. So those grants are going to be used to, again, try to build out the technology piece right now, because I don't see us going inside like anytime soon for programming. So we have to be able to figure out ways to utilize technology. So my hope is that working with the director of education for the state and the reentry office, we'll be able to get our first cohort going before the year ends. And so they'll have basically 2 tracks to choose from. One will be the education, and then there's some people that don't necessarily want higher education, but they may want to learn a trade or skill. So being able to kind of push them in that direction and connect them in that space, as well as addressing the trauma and having some mentors who are formerly incarcerated women, also working with the ladies that come through the program. So I'm really excited. I feel like I didn't rush. And I tell people, like, even though this was like my vision, I feel like God gave this to me inside. It wasn't time. Like people are like, you should do it. And it wasn't time. It was like, this is the time. When I came home, I was blessed to lead an organization for 2 years. I was an executive director for Lincoln Heights Outreach. I always like to shout out my Lincoln Heights family because they embraced me as family in the midst of me transitioning back home and really allowed me to grow in my leadership in that role. And so it really helped prepare me to get to this point. So I've had so many people that have just poured into me. And so it's my turn now to pour into the women that are coming home.
So good. There's the challenge here. You brought it up, saying God you had received this calling or something inside, and then there was it wasn't time yet, and there was an appointed time to do something. That difference between a calling and then the commissioning of it, right? Because there's preparation time in between that whole thing. That's so important, especially for those of us coming home, where a lot of us have those dreams and visions on the inside, but then think as soon as we get out, it just needs to take off and it's just going to go this. But we try to skip over the process and try to walk right in the fulfillment of the vision, but it doesn't happen that way. I tell folks my commissioning happened in 2003, but the commissioning of that, the calling was in 2003, but the commissioning wasn't until 2016 because there was this prep time to get ready, because we want to do things with excellence. We actually want to have an impact, and we don't want to create something out of season and it becomes something that's out of the back of your trunk. And then,
Absolutely.
6 months later, 12 months later, it just fizzles because there's no infrastructure. There's no nothing. That's one of the things I'm really passionate about. That's why I'm glad you said it. As you can see, I just started talking about it, just going and going and going. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to shut up right now.
Because he can talk for like 2 hours about a wooden nickel. Don't tell him not to stop. Look, don't get the pastor on a roll this morning, right? This is, unfortunately, we're only here like 30, 45 minutes. And for Nate, that's like warm-up time. 34, now he's about to hit his stride. Hour 2 is about to be phenomenal. So we ain't gonna open up that Pandora's box today.
I'm stopping right now. Rick, hit us with a question so I don't.
But I guess the one thing I'm curious about, because being in both systems, state and federal, here in Michigan, you being in the federal system and then working with the state in Ohio, can you speak to like some of the differences you noticed from the state to the federal? Because for me, and I mean, I was in the federal system quite a while ago. I got a 17931 number. There was a lot more resources. There were more educational opportunities. There were some vocational training opportunities in the federal system. Even back then, I mean, we're going back 20 years. I'll be 50, getting old, right? But it wasn't the same in that sense, right? I did feel to a certain degree that the federal system had more resources and set you up a little better for success than my experience with the state.
So it's interesting because I feel like it's kind of flip-flop, right? I think, well, at least for women, I can't speak for men, right? So the location that I was at for a federal prison, we had, unless you had like this in the middle type of a sentence, that's the only way I can describe it, right? If your sentence was too short or too long, you didn't qualify for most of the programs. So we did not have any college courses in the that I was in. We had, when I say really some basic level courses like that you could take, like typing, you know, things like that. So I guess that there are people who didn't have any type of skills, but now with people using computers and technology on the outside, if a person like recently came in, a lot of those classes are going to be like, you know, like I already know how to type, you know. We did have things like we had a fire department, we had cosmetology, we had a lot of trades, but we didn't have anything related to like any type of higher ed, you know, career track types of programming at all. The other thing was employment, right? When I went to my orientation, they're like, oh, we have these companies that, you know, work inside the federal prisons. Yeah, we didn't have that. We just had, you know, regular little campus type jobs. Like I worked in the library and somebody worked in the cafeteria, you know, like those types of things. Right. So I think that there's been some changes. And I think also with the women, like I'll tell people, like we had to wear men's clothes, men's boots, like nothing was catered to us as women. Like we weren't treated as women, you know, and, you know, you see all these different bills being passed around, just treating women as women, like getting items that women just need monthly, you know, like why is that an issue? You know, not saying that was the issue where I was at, but what I noticed here in my state is that we have a lot of second chance Pell sites here, at least here in Ohio. So we have a lot of college going on here right now, awesome. which is a good opportunity for programs like what I'm doing, because it kind of provides some support to layer that. And they also have access to tablets here. So they have access to some things that the federal system doesn't. We still have like the little screen where you have to stand in the long line and you have to, you know, so, and I just got home in 2017. So just to kind of share how the time frame. So I think that there are gaps on both sides, right? There are gaps on the federal side and there are gaps on the state side. I just think they look different. So, for example, on the federal side, I was able to take other types of classes that I would not be, like I learned how to play a guitar, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that on the state side that I know of, you know? So there's some other trade-offs, you know, but I think that people would have rather had actual college courses that would have helped them coming home than what we had, because we had people that came in and taught, but it was none of the classes carried over into any type of community college or four-year institution. You could do correspondence. I know you mentioned Ohio University. I know they had their program. You had to work through our education department, and even that process was very tedious for people. So I think that there's just a lot of barriers across the board, and I think that unfortunately, the way women are treated oftentimes is like, you shouldn't be here. You're a mother. You're supposed to be at home with your kids. Like we heard a lot of negative things like that as women, you know, like women aren't supposed to be in prison, you know, type of mentality. Like, no, we shouldn't be, but y'all said
they're anyway. Right. So let them go.
For minimums, you know, like mandatory minimums, and judges saying that we have to be the example. So you're now punishing us yet again, saying like we shouldn't be here, we should be home taking care of our kids. Like we want to be home taking care of our kids, you know. So I think that there are some differences between the two, but you know, I have a pretty good working relationship with a lot of the people in our state office, and you know, they've been very open to me coming in and doing programming, which I feel fortunate, because you know everybody doesn't necessarily have that. I don't know if I could get into the federal system the same way, just because I just got home not too long ago from their system. But I would love the opportunity to be able to go back and to do the same things on the federal side, because I still keep in touch with quite a few people inside. And, you know, especially right now with COVID, there's like nothing going on. You know, like my friends are like, we are just sitting here. And it's really, I think about like what it was like pre-COVID, right? When I was there, and I'm like, so imagine what it looks like now. It was already depressing and sad and all these things. So now it's this other layer of, now you have to stay inside this dorm or inside this cell for like extended periods of time, and you're only going out and getting like 2 meals. So I just think that a lot of the things, unfortunately, are probably a lot more consistent now than they may have been 20 years ago, and not in a good way. You know, like there may be a lot more things that are similar. And I think that the other piece of that is a lot of the federal pieces changed. It seems like after some celebrities went in and attention was brought to like some of the benefits or perks of federal systems, seemed like a lot of things kind of evolved into like, oh, so you think it's plush, you think it's, you know, as people were saying, club fed and all that other stuff. I'm like, when I went in, it was not club fed. Like, it was not that at all.
Quite the contrary, huh?
Right. And so I just think it's important. So I tell people I actually had more resources at the jail in Carolina. I was in the Mecklenburg County Jail, and they had a library program there with the community college. I was like 3 days short of getting my certificate, and they pulled me to send me to the prison. I'm like, wait, let me just finish because 3 days. Yeah, I just had to take like my final test and turn in a paper. So, but our library program where I was at in West Virginia and where I worked, we didn't have any type of program like that. It was just other people that were incarcerated with me showing me what to do and how to do it, and that's what we did, you know. So it's just interesting when you think about resources and services and what's actually available. Again, I'm only speaking from the side of, you know, the perspective of a woman who's been inside, and I just think there's some huge disparities in the facilities when it comes to resources and services for women, and once you get home as well. Because even in the halfway house, it was the federal and the state people were together, and what the men were saying was happening with them and what was happening with us were very different things, very different. Including, I went to a reentry event. I was the only female in the entire room. I was the only woman in the entire room full of men, but minus the vendors, you know, who were there for the reentry event. So can you just imagine? Well, I mean, it may be a little different, a room full of women for you, but for me, like, it was just so uncomfortable. And then I realized this is why the women don't come out to these things, because you're like, you already are trying to readjust to being home, and then you're in this space where people are constantly in your face, and you're just there to get help. You just want resources, you just want support. And so this is all the things that I witnessed and I experienced, and, you know, over these years is what has got me to this point of the program that I'm doing. Every little thing, I just took notes. Obviously it's fresh in my brain because it's my own lived experience, but I just thought about, like, what could have been better about this situation, or how could this situation have improved? And then getting feedback from the women that I actually did time with. When I do presentations, a lot of times I'll go to them and I'll say, hey, I'm talking about this topic. What do you want people to know? You know, because I think it's critical that our voices be lifted up in these spaces, because I'm tired of, I have degrees and everything, but I'm tired of people who don't have lived experiences with degrees saying, oh, we're the experts because we study X, Y, and Z. I honestly feel like I'm more of an expert because of my lived experience than all the degrees I have. And that's real talk.
You know, it's because anyone can get the degree with hard work, determination, right? How many people want to get the lived experience, unfortunately, that the three of us had to have? Right. I don't see anybody signing up to go do 18 and a half years like I did behind bars to figure out what I know. But I can go to college and pay to learn, but they don't want to pay the price that it took for me to learn what I know from being directly in this system. You know, from a very young age until I was 43 years old, I was released. You know, my first incarceration, I was 22. My last incarceration, I went in at like 28 and came home at 43. So, you know what I mean? That people would think, oh, it was the time this time. You did 15 years. That must have been what changed. No, that's not. It was the education, right? It was having this epiphany that I am capable of more, right? That although my trade as a painter is an honorable trade and very necessary, and I have a small painting company to this day, like I couldn't do the work I do without my supplemental income, right? But I also realized that I didn't have to limit myself just to that, because I had other passions. You know, I had other things that throughout my journey became important to me, more important than just making money. You know, I tell people all the time, if I just wanted to make money, I would have blew my painting company up and been sitting back like other contractors I know, driving a 2500 HD $70,000 truck, and that's not my purpose, right? Like money got me into prison to a certain extent, right? Like wanting it more than wanting to be a good person. So I don't do it for the money, but let's not, we can't fool ourselves. We have to have money to live and, to take care of our families. And, my youngest daughter is a senior in nursing school, got to get out there and make some money. But for me, that was the turning point, right? Like staying rooted in God, number one, right? That's my foundation. But secondarily, and what I did in prison was we were part of a nonprofit that we set up mediation centers. We were teaching men how to resolve conflict peacefully. We went 2 years in our housing unit that we developed just for this program with no critical incidents. And, it was all of us learning though. I mean, the housing unit was all about doing better, being better. And so if you didn't want to do that, if you didn't want to constantly be learning, then that just wasn't the place for you. Because the 25 core men that were the facilitators, and we were facilitating at one point 300 men per every 6 months through a 6-month program. I mean, and we weren't getting paid. This was all voluntary. We were teaching classes 7 nights a week in the school building. None of us got paid, but it changed us. It transformed us. It gave us meaning. It gave us purpose. We were learning and we were helping folks to learn. And I mean, it was just one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever been a part of. But it all hinged on education. And I define education by gaining new skills, tools, and knowledge, right? That's education, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's reading a book and talking about it with your peers. Education was just like, I just can't put a strong enough emphasis. That's what turned me, And I'm a knucklehead. I got 7 felonies. Like I didn't get it right. I'm King Get Right's uncle. You know what I mean?
It's huge when we put ourselves in a position. A bit about what you said, Rick. As we're able to give out healing, there's this reciprocal effect that it actually does something to us on the inside as we're able to help others. In turn, we're able to reap the same thing that we actually sow into other people's lives. It comes back, and there's a healing process in being able to help other people in their mess, and helping them come out, helping them recover, get their wind again, and walking with them through the restoration process. Zari, so one more question. We got about 5 minutes left. I want you to talk a bit about the trauma piece. Okay, individuals coming home out of incarceration. And for a lot of us, we've gotten to a place where we had traumatic events prior to even going in. And then the whole course from beginning to end is traumatic on many different fronts. So when an individual comes home, there has been something has altered internally, right? You view things differently, you think differently. Talk about the recovery process coming out. Once an individual comes out, how do you see that? What do you see being the part that is going to help people?
So, I obviously look at my own situation, right? And I also think about like the people that I'm closest to that have been through this. So we talk a lot about the trauma. And as you mentioned, like a lot of people don't understand that oftentimes trauma is what gets people into the system in the first place, like some type of trauma, right? There's something that's connected. And then when we're inside, like it's just one traumatic experience after another. Like, how people speak to you, you're a number, you're not a person, your property, just the language and how people talk to you on a regular basis. And it's like, unless you have some type of support system inside, like it can be even more damaging. I think that a lot of times people will turn to different things inside to cope, and not always healthy things. Some people turn to God, in the form of different spiritual and religious practices, and then some people turn to other destructive types of behavior, which could sometimes prolong their sentence or impact their reentry process. I think that when people are coming home, first of all, people need time. I just think that a lot of times when you are released, the automatic response is get a job, become a productive member of society and go live your best life. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on, however many years or months, however long a person was inside, like, how is this not being addressed? And so I think it's important for people to seek out supports that are going to be beneficial for them. So whether that be a recovery community, whether it be a specific mental health therapist, whether there be organizations or services that provide different supports, I think it's so critical to get connected. And even now, like, I've talked to people who've been out 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, they're still dealing with, you know, their reentry process and what that looks like. And I think because so many of us are pushed immediately into like the workforce side and not really addressing what our needs were and whatever brought us in there, right? Like something got us in there. So are we not even addressing that? Because it's not like the prison addressed while we were all incarcerated. They're not saying, hey, let us help you heal from whatever that is. And so it requires us to get connected and be in community with one another. And so again, for each person, I think it's going to look different. So it may be finding a church or a place of worship. It may be, you know, where there's a healing community. It may be, you know, like I said, finding a actual recovery community that exists. I know when I initially came home, I did Celebrate Recovery inside. So I was looking for a Celebrate Recovery group here. And believe it or not, there weren't any in my city. Like they were like really, really far out that you can't access just on a bus. But there were some women at my halfway house that had done Celebrate Recovery. So we kind of formed our own little, you know, our own little group and everything while we were there. And then, and I see a therapist, like for me personally, like I still see a therapist. I think that, you know, I tell people I was a therapist at one point. And so I always tell people therapy is good. It's not a bad thing. And I think that a lot of times there are these stigmas associated with getting help and to being able to talk about it. So I think it's just important to find like a healing community for you. And also self-care is critical. I think that a lot of us, when we come home, we hit the ground running. And we are caregivers, no matter what our charge was. Like somehow we were, you know, I feel like every time I hear people's stories, somehow a person is a caregiver, and somehow however their charge is somehow related to at some point they were like taking care of people or doing other, you know, doing these different things or defending people or whatever it is. So I think that we have to take time for ourselves, and self-care is so critical in that space as well. So finding who you are, exploring who you are, and then finding those things that are going to be healthy for you. So those are just a few things like that come to my mind when I think about just like myself and just others that I've been on this journey with. But I'm just really taking the time when you initially get home, and I just feel like that is the piece that's missing. And so I'm hoping like here with the programming that I'm doing that we allow time for the women that we're working with to be able to have some healing, having that, you know, developing self-care practices, and also working with a therapist, and prayerfully me getting my license back so that I can also provide some of those supports as well for the women that are coming through.
Absolutely. That's so good.
Awesome.
It's the recovery process is so huge. I always tell, you know, when individuals first get here to Fresh Coast, Fresh Out, so, you know, here's a mindset and a habit you need to develop. You need to learn how to enjoy where you're at on the way to where you're going, right? And then it's implementing those different factors into our lives. It's like, hey, slow down, take a breath, just enjoy the fact that you can go to Meijer or Walmart and get you some Fruity Pebbles and some Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and you eat the whole box, and you don't have 8 minutes to get out of the chow hall. You can sit there. And then guess what? You can pour another big stupid bowl if you want. Enjoy it, right? Because the hard work, the focus, and being inside of a healthy environment, a healthy community, like you said, so huge.
It's how folks come home. I mean, I came home this time. My brother gave me a place to live with him and his wife for a year, rent free.
Yeah.
Right. Without that opportunity to study, to be able to focus on school, to be able to focus on starting a nonprofit, to be able to focus on starting a for-profit painting company. And the painting company became, you know, my reality. Why? Because I couldn't get a job. Nobody was hiring me anyway. So, I mean, I did it out of survival and out of necessity. But I mean, again, it's like, how many people come home to a year of living for free, right? Like the only thing I was responsible for was feeding myself. I didn't even have to help with utilities. He said, nothing. You've been here for years, Rick, before you got here. I'm going to be here for years after you're gone. This 1 year, you can be here, right? And that was pivotal in my transformation, in my coming home, right? And so folks don't, everyone wants us to be happy because, hey, you're out. No, I mean, like you said, there's traumas, there's challenges, there's things, that we haven't dealt with, that we didn't have resources to deal with on the inside. And in order to come home fully and be present in these moments, that's what we need, right? We need to be able to heal. We need to be able to address these things.
Absolutely.
Ourselves before our community so that we don't cause further harm to our community, right? And that our community doesn't cause further harm to us. Because it's a two-way street. Let's not be mistaken, right? Oftentimes the community plays a big role in how these things are. So I want to thank you. Like, you've inspired me in so many ways to seriously go back, do those 6 credits, wrap up that associates, so I can move on to my bachelor's, right? Like, I appreciate your conversation today and your story. You honestly, I know if you inspired me, you've had to inspire hundreds of folks that tune into this. So I can't thank you enough for giving your time today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Zaria. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you betcha. Hey, Facebook, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate all the viewers. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for putting the links in the comment for us and managing that. We really do appreciate you. You're an all-star. Everyone else out on Facebook, we'll see you guys soon, and we'll be back next week, Thursday, with Rick.
Don't forget to register. We got the Safe and Just annual dinner coming up. We got phenomenal speakers. Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist will be doing a live address. Kate threw that in the box as well. So folks, check that out. It's going to be an amazing meeting. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys next week, Thursday. Peace.
Thank you.
Peace.